The domestication of the canine. How did our wonderful furry companions come in to be in our lives? Not just the one that is cuddled up by your side right now, but dogs as a species. Where did they originate from? Was it a smooth process of evolution, or was that path interrupted or manufactured? Though we have some scientific evidence to support an understanding of how the physical dog evolved, due to our own species being one that has periods of amnesia within its own evolution, we have also lost the knowledge of how the dogs evolved alongside us. But by looking at process of domestication, a number of common theories, breeding experiments, and native languages, we can develop a better understanding of how this came to be. Process of domestication. Domestication started as a need for food. Humans typically travelled seasonally in groups, having animals at hand that provided food in turn could become food if necessary, became an essential benefit to the clan's survival. The first animals to be domesticated were likely goats, which were sure-footed and travelled well, had an extremely variable herbaceous diet, and could find their own food sources in almost any terrain, whilst providing milk, meat, and pelts to feed and clothe the clan. Chickens, whose diets consisted of insects, seeds, and plants, resourceful at finding their own food and light to transport, were a good supply of meat and eggs. They were likely first domesticated from the flightly game birds of the forests in Asia. As humans evolved from travelling nomads to building sustainable settlements where grass grew, sheep could graze, and these were in no doubt the next animals to be domesticated, not only for meat, but now as a resource of wool, which could be worked into fitted clothing, cattle were likely to follow next. Domestication of animals took a leap when agriculture became the next stage of human development, working the land to grow vegetables and grain to sustain them. Clearing pasture and harvesting was hard work. Beasts of burden were the next animals to enter domestication. Ox, bison, early versions of cattle we know today, and horses were amongst the animals that could be managed to lighten the workload. Early dogs were attracted to human settlements, and this led to the domestication of the species to assist in hunting and guard the homesteads. But domestication does not just happen. Prior to this, the closest interaction with animals was likely to have been to kill and eat them. But to domesticate them, they would need to catch and raise animals. It was most likely that the easiest to catch were the ones without such keen instincts, not as quick to think, and maybe young animals whose parents were killed for food. Those animals that proved too difficult to handle, manage, or train would have been slaughtered for food, leaving the easiest to be bred into domestication. Maybe without being aware of what they were doing, they were the first to introduce selective breeding programs of animals for domestication. Once awareness of this selective breeding knowledge was understood, domestication escalated and provided humans with choice, maybe for temperament, maybe for size, maybe for the colour of their coat. We established breed types in each species of domesticated animals so that people could become selective and breed and buy to order. Eventually, from domestication of work animals evolved the world of pets, animals to live with humans for no other reason than companionship, and no species has been subjected to domestication breeding for what has become a pet industry than that of our beloved dog. Theories on the domestication of the dog. We have limited evidence on how the dog came to be domesticated, but there have been much research and discussions on the topic, resulting in a number of theories. We will look now at some of the most popular of these and where else we may look for insight on how the dog became domesticated. Self-domestication, flight distance. Wolves with a lower flight impulse could cope to be around humans for longer. Those which hung around passed on these more docile genes. The more developed these docile genes became, the less efficient they were at hunting and killing. They would have hung around the waste areas of humans to feed on scraps. These dogs would have likely become protective over their food source against other animals, and this may have been the route to dogs forming a guarding relationship with human settlements. This could have been further rewarded with food as the relationship became more beneficial to both species, aiding socialization with humans. These became the first proto-dogs. No huge effort or risk taken on either human or canine species suggests that this may have been one of the most likely paths of domestication with the least resistance. Symbiotic mutualism hypothesis. Humans and dogs are more or less equal in the animal kingdom. They live in similar environments and eat similar prey. Humans and wolves have complex social groups, hierarchical structure, and communication skills used to cooperatively hunt and achieve goals. These humans and wolves may have found themselves sharing or fighting over carcasses. Those wolves that are not killed and chased off may have had a lower flight impulse, becoming more docile, found benefits to not expending energy hunting, and just hung around human camps to benefit from being thrown the odd bone or other waste food and profited by our waste. This theory suggests a level of risk on both species, with likelihood that humans may have had to drive packs away from their kill. It may also be easy to believe that those wolves that did not flee were likely to be stronger and braver rather than more docile. This theory does not suggest the easiest, most natural path to winning a relationship between both species. However, over time and a path of mutual learning between both species to utilize each other's skills and work together, it is somewhat easy to see how this could have morphed into the hunting dog relationship that had evolved through to domestication. Artificial selection. People trapping wolves for coats and furs they were attracted to, keeping these wolves in captivity and then feeding off their flesh in harsh weathers and using their pelts for warmth. Those that were easier to handle would have been more likely to be kept for breeding. Holding multiple wild predator animals captive for breeding would have been challenging and most likely dangerous, with risky learning curves on building secure enclosures. Sharing the same valuable food source, which would have been hunted and provided to them on top of the village's needs, would have been a huge expense of energy for an unknown level of reward. The chances of being attacked, mutilated, or even killed by a powerful wild animal you were holding captive was highly likely, especially in the early stages. Those strong enough to handle the situations were the highest at risk, and those strong members of the village would have been too valuable to take chances with. Which suggests this would have been one of the least likely options taken for domesticating dogs from wolves. Pet wolf, the Pinocchio hypothesis. Adopted wild wolf cubs found in the wild and kept the natural, more docile ones as part of the clan. The pups would have needed to have been found before their eyes had opened to stand the best chance of successful socialization to handling. This alone would have restricted the success of the first step of this process. Selecting and keeping the ones with most docile genes as they grew bigger. But these docile genes do not automatically happen in any or every litter, so this narrowed further chances of success in this theory. Add to that fact that you cannot just pull out a wolf from a den and raise it as a dog. You would constantly be up against socialization and training issues. Wolves' crucial development period ends even before their eyes are open, meaning that added further challenges in the process, plus the skills of training an animal that would become your equal and surpass your size and strength with a wild nature that has not as yet been bred out, makes this one of the least likely methods of domestication. However, if this method was applied in conjunctions with theories 1 or 2, where the docility of the species is already evolving, and the locality of these pup dens would be easier to find and obtain, it could be a practical step, and the most likely a workable scenario. The Siberian fox experiment. Foxes were collected and tested for fear aggression response. Any foxes that cowered away from the hand or didn't bite were kept. These foxes were then bred together over 13 to 20 generations to create the domestic fox. Stop, bark, spotted coat, waggy tail, happy playful disposition, docile and liked humans. This was an official experiment. However, similar techniques may have been initial hobbies and intriguing entertainment, which led to the movement of breeding dogs for pets. As the learning curve of breeding to predict coat colour, ear and tail shape, body size and temperament became desirable in a pet companion animal. The twilight skulls. Skulls have been found where it is hard to tell if it is a wolf or if it is a dog, i.e., was the canine dangerous or not? The oldest of these skulls was found in Goyot Cave in Belgium, believed to be 33,000 years old. Comparisons between modern wolves and dogs suggest it leans more towards the dog or proto-dog. Many studies since, including genetic ones, have suggested that it isn't dog. But the question remains, what caused this genetic change in the canine? Was it environmental or possibly gene pool restrictions? Genetic studies will confirm that the genetic signature of the dog has been around for about 20,000 years, up to the Paleolithic. But it is likely that either artificial or natural selection was already going on before then. Native cultural insight. Often, looking at native cultures and their languages will provide us with insight. Almost every culture interacts with dogs. A comparison of the way dogs are named tells us a lot about the people who name them. The dog was the only work animal indigenous Americans had until the horse was introduced. In many native languages, the word for horse derives from dog. The mystical word for horse in Dakota is Shankan Wankan, excuse my pronunciation, the Holy Spirit of the dog. The Dakota Sioux word for horse means great mysterious dog. The Teton Dakota word for dog means horse of woman. The Karankawa Indians of the Texas Gulf Coast called the dog a word that translates to kiss. Karankawa means dog lovers or dog raisers. And with this sharing of wisdom, our wheel takes a turn.